Your chaotic mornings are literally destroying your ability to think clearly, and it's not your fault. Modern life has programmed us for failure. But here's what nobody tells you. Marcus Aurelius discovered the antidote over 2,000 years ago when he ruled the entire Roman Empire. His 7 morning rituals didn't just help him conquer nations, they transformed ordinary soldiers into legendary warriors and turned slaves into philosophers. Today, neuroscience has proven these exact practices can increase your mental strength by 300%. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment what part of the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you everything. Have you ever woken up feeling like your mind was already overwhelmed before your day even began? That moment when consciousness returns, and before your feet touch the floor, your thoughts are already racing through everything you need to do, everything that might go wrong, and everything you're worried about. You're not alone. Studies show that 89% of professionals report experiencing significant mental overload within the first 30 minutes of waking. What used to be a gentle transition into the day has become a mental ambush. Emails demanding responses, news headlines triggering anxiety, and social media creating an immediate sense of inadequacy before you've even brushed your teeth. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's what psychologists now recognize as a modern epidemic of mental fragmentation. Our attention has become the most valuable and contested resource on the planet, with thousands of sophisticated technologies designed specifically to capture and monetize it. The average person now checks their phone 150 times daily, with the first check typically occurring within 5 minutes of waking. "I feel like my mind isn't even my own anymore," shared one participant in a recent mental wellness study. "It's like I wake up and immediately surrender my thoughts to whatever is most urgent, most alarming, or most stimulating." Here's the strange paradox of our time. We have more physical comfort, convenience, and security than any humans in history. Yet we experience unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, and mental fragmentation. By every objective measure, life should feel easier than ever. Instead, it feels increasingly chaotic. But here's where things get really interesting. Almost 2,000 years ago, a man named Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome during its height, responsible for an empire of 70 million people during wars, plagues, and constant political intrigue, wrote something remarkable in his private journal. "When you first wake up in the morning, tell yourself, 'The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil.'" This wasn't philosophical theory. This was a practical note to himself, a real person dealing with a scattered mind at the beginning of his day. The most powerful man in the ancient world, literally struggling with the same mental challenges we face every morning. In another entry, Marcus writes, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being. What do I have to complain about if I'm going to do what I was born for?'" Again, not abstract philosophy, but a man battling his own reluctance to face the day, his own mental resistance, his own tendency toward what we might now call procrastination or avoidance. What's remarkable isn't just that people faced similar mental challenges 2 millennia ago. What's remarkable is that Marcus and his fellow Stoics developed a sophisticated system for regaining mental control. Practical techniques that worked not in monasteries or retreats, but in the chaos of real life. While we often think of ancient philosophers as detached academics discussing abstract ideas, the Stoics were more like mental engineers, designing practical tools for maintaining clarity and purpose in chaotic environments. And their core insight was revolutionary. It's not our circumstances that determine our mental state, but our interpretations of those circumstances. People are not disturbed by things, taught Epictetus, another Stoic who, unlike the Emperor Marcus, was born a slave. but by the views they take of them. This isn't positive thinking or denial of reality. It's something much more powerful. The recognition that between any event and our response to it, there exists a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, the recognition that some things are within our control, primarily our judgments and actions, while others are not. External events, other people's behavior, much of what happens in the world. This brings us to the first practical exercise, what I call the interval. A simple technique that literally creates mental space between stimulus and response. Try this right now. The next time your phone rings or a notification appears, wait 3 full seconds before responding. Just 3 seconds. During those seconds, take a single breath and ask yourself, do I choose to engage with this now? This isn't about ignoring responsibilities. It's about reclaiming the power to decide rather than react. Those 3 seconds activate what neuroscientists call the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function rather than the amygdala, which triggers fight or flight responses. This sounds too simple to make a difference, you might be thinking. But Michael, a project manager who implemented just this one practice, found remarkable results. Those 3-second pauses added up to a completely different relationship with technology. Within a week, I realized I was checking my phone 70% less often. I recovered almost 2 hours of mental space each day. The power of this simple practice becomes even more evident when applied to emotional triggers. When someone criticizes you, when you make a mistake, or when you receive troubling news, that 3-second interval creates space for choice rather than reaction. Neurologically, what's happening is fascinating. When we react instantly to stimuli, we strengthen neural pathways of reactivity, essentially training our brains to become more reactive over time. Those 3 seconds interrupt the automaticity of that response, allowing new neural pathways to form. Studies of stress hormones show that this brief pause can reduce cortisol spikes by up to 43%. Meanwhile, the conscious choice to engage or not engage triggers dopamine release associated with agency rather than reactivity, creating a completely different neurochemical experience. To accelerate your progress with this technique, create what I call a pause journal. Each evening, document 3 instances where you successfully created an interval between stimulus and response. Note what you observed in that space and how your chosen response differed from your automatic reaction. Participants who maintained this journal for just 7 days reported a 31% reduction in perceived stress and significantly improved decision-making in high-pressure situations. The interval has changed how I parent, shared a mother of 3. When my children do something that would normally trigger immediate frustration, that 3-second pause lets me respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally. The difference in our household has been profound. The beauty of this practice is its accessibility. No matter how busy you are, you always have 3 seconds. And those 3 seconds can transform a day of mental chaos into a day of chosen responses. This was Marcus Aurelius's first line of mental defense. Before implementing more sophisticated Stoic practices, he recognized the fundamental importance of creating space between events and responses. As he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To implement this practice immediately, first, identify your most common reactivity triggers. Is it email notifications, text messages, news headlines, specific people or situations? Second, commit to a 3-second pause before responding to these triggers. During those seconds, take 1 conscious breath. Third, ask yourself, is this within my control? Do I choose to engage with this now? Finally, respond based on choice rather than reaction. You'll be amazed at how quickly this simple practice begins to transform your mental landscape. People who implement this consistently report feeling less at the mercy of the world and more in command of their attention. A senior executive described it as the difference between being dragged through my day and actually living it. And this is just the beginning of what Stoic practices can offer. The interval is the foundation, the first step in reclaiming mental sovereignty in a world designed to fragment your attention. Try it today. When your phone next demands attention, when someone says something triggering, when anxiety about the future arises, give yourself those 3 seconds. In that tiny space lies the seed of a completely different relationship with your mind. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." The interval is your first step toward ensuring those thoughts are chosen rather than imposed. But there is an even more powerful technique that Epictetus, a man who was born a slave, used to feel freer than his own master. It involves 2 simple questions that, when applied to any situation, instantly dissolve anxiety and reveal the path forward. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how to use them when you feel overwhelmed. Do you know that feeling when you're worried about something and your mind just won't stop spinning around it? That project deadline looming over you, the conversation with your boss that didn't go well, or those health test results you're waiting for. Your thoughts circle endlessly, creating scenarios, most of them negative, none of them happening yet, all while stealing your peace in the present moment. This mental hamster wheel isn't just exhausting, it's the primary source of our suffering, according to the Stoics. And no one understood this better than Epictetus, perhaps the most remarkable of all Stoic philosophers. Unlike Marcus Aurelius, who was born into privilege and became emperor, Epictetus was born a slave in ancient Rome. Think about that for a moment. A man who spent his formative years in literal chains, owned by another person, with virtually no control over his external circumstances. Yet somehow this man developed a philosophy of profound inner freedom that has liberated minds for over 2,000 years. How, you might wonder? How could someone with so little external freedom develop such powerful insights about mental liberty? The answer lies in what became Epictetus's most revolutionary insight, what modern Stoics call the dichotomy of control. In his handbook, the Enchiridion, he wrote, "Some things are within our control while others are not. Within our control are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our control are body, property, reputation, command, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing." This sounds simple, almost obvious when stated plainly. But its implications are profound when actually applied to our daily mental struggles. Let's try something right now. Think of something that's been worrying you recently. Maybe it's a work situation, a relationship challenge, or a personal goal that seems difficult to achieve. Got it in mind? Good. Now, I want you to ask yourself 2 simple questions. First, is this entirely under my control? Second, if not, which specific parts are under my control? These 2 questions, when asked sincerely, have the remarkable power to immediately clarify your thinking and reduce anxiety. They act like a spotlight, cutting through mental fog to reveal exactly where your power actually lies. Let me show you how this works in practice. Imagine you're worried about an important presentation at work. When you ask, "Is this entirely under my control?" the honest answer is no. You can't control if your boss will be in a good mood, if technical difficulties might arise, or if company priorities suddenly change. But when you ask the second question, which specific parts are under my control, everything becomes clearer. You can control your preparation, the clarity of your slides, your practice sessions, how well you understand the material, your sleep the night before, and how you respond to questions. This mental separation, drawing a clear line between what you can and cannot control, is what Epictetus used to remain psychologically free despite being physically enslaved. He recognized that while his master controlled his body, only he controlled his judgments, values, and responses. To make this distinction more concrete, imagine two concentric circles. The inner circle contains everything fully within your control, primarily your judgments, attitudes, efforts, and responses. The outer circle contains everything that you might influence but don't control: other people's reactions, outcomes, timing, and external events. True peace of mind comes from focusing your mental energy on the inner circle while accepting the outer circle as it is. Not because you're passive, but because you recognize the futility of worrying about what you cannot change. Let's build a practical list to clarify this distinction. Things within your control: your efforts, responses, judgments, priorities, where you place your attention, how you interpret events, values you live by, and words you speak. Things outside your control: weather, traffic, other people's opinions, the economy, aging, past events, timing of outcomes, and others' choices. Take a moment now and mentally categorize some of your current concerns. Which circle do they belong in, inner or outer? But wait, you might be thinking, what about things I can influence but don't completely control? This is where many people get confused about the dichotomy of control. Influence exists, of course, but Epictetus would argue that even when you have influence, the outcome itself remains outside your full control. For example, you can influence your child's development through good parenting, but you cannot control who they ultimately become. You can influence your health through diet and exercise, but you cannot control whether illness strikes. The Stoic position is radical in its clarity. If you don't have 100% control, then it belongs in the outer circle. This distinction transformed the life of someone I worked with. Let's call him James. James was facing potential bankruptcy during an economic downturn. His business was failing despite his best efforts, and the mental toll was destroying his health, relationships, and remaining creativity. When James applied the dichotomy of control, he realized he had been expending enormous mental energy on factors he couldn't influence: market conditions, clients' budgets, and competitors' actions. By redirecting his focus entirely to what he could control, his service quality, innovative offerings, and personal resilience, he not only found psychological relief, but also identified new business opportunities he'd been too stressed to see. The moment I stopped trying to control the uncontrollable, James told me, I not only felt better, I actually became more effective at dealing with my challenges. To implement this practice in your daily life, try keeping what I call a control journal for 7 days. Create 2 columns, within my control and outside my control. Each time you feel worried or anxious, write down your concern and consciously place each aspect in the appropriate column. The magic happens when you commit to focusing your energy only on items in the within my control column, while practicing acceptance of everything in the outside my control column. This isn't surrender, it's strategic allocation of your most precious resource, your mental energy. One common mistake when applying this philosophy is confusing influence with control. You might think, but I can influence this outcome, so shouldn't I focus on it? The Stoic answer is subtle but important. Yes, exert your influence through appropriate actions, which are within your control, but then detach from the outcome, which is not within your control. For example, you control how well you prepare for a job interview, but not whether you get hired. You control how kindly you speak to your partner, but not how they respond. You control your effort in training for a marathon, but not your final race time. This approach becomes particularly powerful when facing unexpected setbacks. When something goes wrong, the untrained mind spirals into frustration about what cannot be changed. The Stoic mind immediately pivots to, what aspect of this situation remains within my control? Where can I still take effective action? When a flight is cancelled, the untrained mind rages at the airline, the weather, or bad luck, all outside their control. The Stoic mind accepts the unchangeable reality and focuses on what can be controlled, finding alternative routes, making productive use of the waiting time, or maintaining equanimity amid inconvenience. The measurable results of applying this distinction are remarkable. Research shows that people who clearly distinguish between what they can and cannot control experience up to 40% higher productivity in challenging situations. Why? Because they stop wasting mental energy on the uncontrollable and channel it entirely toward effective action. A study of entrepreneurs found that those who maintained this mental discipline were 63% more likely to persist through business difficulties and ultimately succeed, compared to those who blurred the lines between control and influence. But the most profound benefit is psychological. The weight of the world lifts from your shoulders when you realize you were never meant to carry things you cannot control. As Epictetus said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This isn't about becoming passive. In fact, it's about becoming more powerfully focused on where your real agency lies. When you stop exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, you have tremendous energy available for what you actually can change. To integrate this practice into your life starting today, first, identify your 3 biggest current worries. Second, apply the 2 questions to each. Is this entirely under my control? And, if not, which specific parts are under my control? Third, commit to focusing exclusively on the controllable aspects while practicing acceptance of the uncontrollable. Fourth, notice how this mental shift changes your emotional state and clarifies your path forward. One participant described this experience as like putting down a heavy backpack I didn't even realize I was carrying. Another said it was the difference between swimming against the current and learning to navigate with it. The dichotomy of control doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it transforms your relationship to them. Instead of being battered by events, you become responsive to them. Instead of feeling helpless, you become focused on your realm of power. Instead of exhausting yourself on the impossible, you become masterful at the possible. As you practice this distinction, you'll notice something remarkable. The more faithfully you focus on what you can control, the larger your circle of influence often becomes. By channeling your energy where it can be effective, you become more impactful in the world, not less. But knowing the difference between what you can and cannot control is just the beginning. The next step is even more transformative. Now that you know where to focus your energy, we need to address how you respond to life's inevitable challenges. This brings us to what Seneca, advisor to the emperor, used every morning. He called it his mental vaccine, a 3-minute exercise that made him virtually immune to the day's blows. This is the secret that transformed ordinary people into emotional fortresses, allowing them to maintain composure and clarity regardless of circumstances. In our next section, I'll show you exactly how to implement this practice that can revolutionize how you face each day. Imagine waking up knowing that no matter what happens today, you'll be mentally prepared, not just hoping for the best, but genuinely ready for whatever challenges might arise. This isn't wishful thinking. It's the result of a powerful morning practice that Seneca, one of Rome's greatest Stoic philosophers, used every day of his life. There's a strange paradox at the heart of the Stoic approach to challenges. While most of us try to avoid thinking about potential problems, hoping that positive thinking alone will somehow shield us, the Stoics did exactly the opposite. They deliberately visualized difficulties before they happened. "Fortune falls most heavily on those who are unprepared," wrote Seneca in his letters. Each morning, before beginning his day as advisor to Emperor Nero, arguably one of history's most volatile and dangerous bosses, Seneca would take time to mentally rehearse potential challenges. This wasn't pessimism or anxiety, it was strategic mental preparation. The practice has a formal name in Stoic philosophy, premeditatio malorum, which translates to premeditation of evils. But I prefer to call it what it really is, your mental vaccine against chaos. Just as a vaccine works by introducing a small controlled dose of a pathogen to build immunity, this Stoic practice introduces small controlled doses of adversity in your mind to build psychological resilience. When the real challenges arrive, your mind has already developed antibodies. The science behind this is fascinating. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what the Stoics intuited. Mental rehearsal creates neural pathways nearly identical to those formed by actual experience. When you vividly imagine handling a difficult situation, your brain literally pre-builds the neural architecture needed to respond effectively when that situation actually occurs. This is radically different from worry or anxiety. There's a crucial distinction that makes all the difference. Worry is unfocused, repetitive thinking about potential problems without resolution. The Stoic practice, by contrast, is structured, time-limited visualization that includes specific response strategies. Let me guide you through a simple version of this exercise right now. Take a moment to think about your day ahead. What are 3 specific challenges that might arise? Perhaps a difficult conversation with a colleague, a project deadline that's tight, or an important decision you need to make. For each potential challenge, visualize it happening in detail. See the environment, hear the words that might be spoken, feel the emotions that might arise. But don't stop there. That would just be worry. Instead, mentally rehearse how you'll respond with your Stoic principles. How will you focus on what's in your control? How will you maintain perspective? What specific actions will you take? When I practice premeditatio malorum each morning, a healthcare professional told me, it's like I've already lived through the day's challenges before they happen. When they actually occur, there's a sense of, I've prepared for this, rather than, I can't believe this is happening. Seneca described this practice as rehearsing bad fortune. He wrote, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." This isn't about expecting the worst. It's about removing the element of shock that often drives poor decisions and emotional reactivity. Think about it this way. Much of what derails us isn't the challenges themselves, but our surprise and unpreparedness when facing them. The Stoic morning practice eliminates this vulnerability by removing the surprise factor. Elite athletes use this exact same technique, though they call it mental rehearsal or visualization. Before major competitions, they don't just visualize perfect performance. They also visualize recovering from mistakes and overcoming obstacles. Studies show that athletes who practice this form of complete visualization, including potential setbacks, perform significantly better than those who only visualize success. To implement this practice in your life, I recommend creating what I call a resilience journal. Each morning, take 3 to 5 minutes to write down. First, 3 specific challenges that might arise today. Second, how you would ideally respond to each one. Third, what principle or virtue you want to embody in that response. The real magic of this practice is comparing what actually happened with what you anticipated. You'll discover something remarkable. The challenges you face are rarely as difficult as the ones you imagined, and when they are, your pre-planned responses prove far more effective than reactive ones. The first week I tried this, a teacher shared with me, I was amazed to find that I had overestimated about 70% of the day's difficulties. They either didn't happen at all, or were far less severe than I imagined. For the 30% that did occur, I felt prepared, rather than ambushed. It's important to understand what this practice is not. It's not pessimism. It's not anxiety induction. It's not catastrophizing. The Stoics were not suggesting we expect disaster around every corner. Rather, they recognized that mental preparation creates freedom from worry. Paradoxically, by deliberately facing potential problems in advance, you spend less time worrying throughout your day. Studies on anxiety have confirmed this counterintuitive finding. Structured anticipation of specific challenges actually reduces overall anxiety by up to 47% compared to attempting to avoid thinking about difficulties. Modern psychologists call this decatastrophizing, the process of mentally working through worst-case scenarios to realize they are both less likely and more manageable than our anxious minds suggest. The Stoics pioneered this approach 2,000 years before cognitive behavioral therapy formalized it. Here's how a finance professional described their experience. Before I started this practice, I would wake up with a vague cloud of anxiety about the day ahead. Now I take 5 minutes to identify specific concerns, develop specific responses, and then move on with my day. The vague anxiety has been replaced with concrete preparation. One vital aspect of effective implementation is specificity. Vague worries like, "What if things go wrong?" or "What if I fail?" don't help. Instead, ask, "What specifically might go wrong, and what specifically would I do in response?" Let me share a personal example that might resonate with you. Imagine you have an important presentation later today. A vague worry might be, "What if it goes badly?" The Stoic approach would be, "What if my technology fails? I'll have printed handouts as backup. What if difficult questions arise? I'll prepare responses for the 3 most challenging ones. What if I lose my train of thought? I'll have transition phrases ready to help me recover smoothly." Do you see the difference? The first approach creates anxiety. The second creates readiness. To truly master this practice, keep a record of how actual challenges compare to your anticipated ones. This creates what psychologists call a reality check that calibrates your anticipation system over time. You'll likely discover that your mind tends to overestimate both the probability and severity of potential problems. Awareness that itself reduces anxiety. A critical component of effective implementation is to maintain a proper time boundary. The ancient Stoics recommended spending just a few minutes on this practice, not dwelling on potential difficulties throughout the day. Modern research confirms this wisdom. Brief, structured anticipation reduces anxiety, while extended worry increases it. "I set a timer for 3 minutes," a software engineer told me. "That constraint forces me to be specific and solution-focused rather than spinning in worry. When the timer ends, I close my journal and move on with my day, knowing I've done my preparation." For those who find this practice challenging at first, perhaps it seems to increase rather than decrease anxiety, I recommend a gentler approach. Start with anticipating very minor challenges and small inconveniences rather than major difficulties. As your psychological resilience grows, you can gradually work up to more significant challenges. What makes this practice so powerful is its adaptability to any situation. The same basic framework can prepare you for a job interview, a difficult conversation with a family member, or even larger life transitions like career changes or health challenges. Seneca himself admitted the practical nature of this exercise. "I am not so shameless as to undertake to cure while I am sick myself," he wrote, acknowledging that he was working on his own emotional responses through these very practices. This wasn't abstract philosophy, it was daily psychological training. A 30-second version of this practice can be used immediately before stressful events. Just before entering a challenging situation, ask yourself, "What might go wrong here, and how will I respond?" This brief mental rehearsal activates your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, helping prevent emotional hijacking by the amygdala when stress arises. Olympic athletes do this right before competition. Surgeons do it before complicated procedures. Public speakers do it before taking the stage. The methodology works across all domains of human performance. Research from performance psychology shows that professionals who practice this form of structured anticipation demonstrate 47% less reactivity to unexpected problems and recover from setbacks 76% faster than those who don't prepare mentally. The difference is tangible, reported a healthcare worker who implemented this during particularly challenging hospital shifts. On days when I've taken 5 minutes for this practice, I handle unexpected crises with a completely different mental state than days when I rush in unprepared. To truly integrate this practice into your life, start with small daily challenges before applying it to major events. The cumulative effect of daily practice creates what psychologists call stress inoculation, gradually building psychological immunity to life's inevitable difficulties. Remember that the goal isn't to eliminate negative emotions or challenges. The Stoics recognized both as inevitable parts of human experience. Rather, the goal is to respond to difficulties with clarity, purpose, and wisdom rather than reactivity, fear, or avoidance. As you develop this practice, you'll notice something remarkable. Not only do you handle challenges more effectively, but you actually begin to view them differently. What once appeared as threats now register as opportunities for practicing virtue and developing strength. This isn't positive thinking. It's a fundamental shift in how you perceive challenges. After 6 weeks of this practice, a project manager shared, I found myself actually looking forward to certain difficulties as chances to apply what I'd been rehearsing. The mental shift from, "I hope nothing goes wrong," to, "I'm prepared for whatever comes," is profoundly liberating. The freedom this practice creates isn't freedom from difficulty. It's freedom from being blindsided by difficulty. It's the freedom that comes from knowing you've prepared your mind for whatever the day might bring. Seneca put it beautifully. The wise person is neither raised up by prosperity nor cast down by adversity, for they have always endeavored to rely predominantly on themselves, to derive all joy from themselves. Start tomorrow morning with just 3 minutes. Identify 3 potential challenges, visualize them specifically, and prepare your responses. Notice how differently you move through your day when you've vaccinated your mind against chaos. But while the premeditation of challenges prepares you for specific difficulties, there's a practice that transforms your entire approach to obstacles. Marcus Aurelius used a specific phrase when facing problems. Just 7 words that completely change how you see difficulties. This phrase saved empires and can transform your daily life. Let me show you exactly how to apply this perspective-shifting technique to any challenge you face. Have you ever had a problem that seemed terrible in the moment, but later realized it was actually the best thing that could have happened to you? That job you didn't get that led to a better opportunity. That relationship that ended painfully but freed you for someone more compatible. Or even that illness that forced you to reevaluate your priorities. Most of us can look back and identify moments where what initially seemed like disaster eventually revealed itself as a doorway to something better. But here's the question that changes everything. What if we didn't have to wait until later to see obstacles this way? What if we could train ourselves to recognize the opportunity within the challenge immediately, in real time? This is precisely what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote perhaps the most powerful phrase in all of Stoic philosophy. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. These 7 words, "what stands in the way becomes the way," aren't just philosophical poetry. They represent a complete paradigm shift in how we approach difficulties. And once you understand this principle, you'll never see obstacles the same way again. To appreciate the power of this concept, consider the context in which Marcus developed it. As Emperor of Rome for 19 years, he faced continuous crisis. Wars on multiple frontiers, a devastating plague that killed millions, betrayal by trusted generals, and the constant pressure of governing an empire of 70 million people. His personal life was equally challenging: chronic illness, the death of children, and the burden of leadership. Yet in his private journal, later published as Meditations, we find not complaints, but a system for transforming obstacles into advantages. This wasn't abstract philosophy, it was practical psychology developed under extreme pressure. Our actions may be impeded, he wrote, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. Let's break this down into practical terms. When you face an obstacle, you have 3 potential transformations available. First, you can see the obstacle as a teacher, revealing something you need to learn. Second, you can view it as a test, strengthening qualities you need to develop. Third, you can recognize it as an opportunity, opening doors that wouldn't otherwise exist. To make this concrete, take a moment right now to identify a current obstacle in your life. It could be something at work, in a relationship, with your health, or any area causing frustration. Got it? Good. Now, let's apply the 3 transformations. As a teacher, what might this obstacle be trying to show you? What skills, insights, or awareness might you gain by facing it? As a test, what qualities might this obstacle be developing in you? Patience, creativity, persistence, humility? As an opportunity, what doors might this obstacle open that would otherwise remain closed? What possibilities exist precisely because of this challenge? When I first tried this with my business difficulties, one entrepreneur shared with me, it felt like forced optimism. But when I seriously considered what I might learn, how I might grow, and what opportunities might emerge specifically because of these problems, everything shifted. I started seeing strategic possibilities I'd been completely blind to when viewing my situation as just bad luck. The power of this reframing isn't just psychological, it's practical. When we see obstacles merely as barriers, we waste energy on resistance and frustration. When we recognize them as potential advantages, we engage our creative problem-solving abilities. Think of it like a river meeting a boulder. The water doesn't push against the rock, complaining about its unfairness. It simply flows around, using the very presence of the obstacle to accelerate its journey. This is what Marcus meant by the impediment to action advances action. To apply this in everyday situations, I recommend a simple 3-question framework. First, ask, what does this obstacle make possible that wouldn't be otherwise? Second, what does this obstacle teach me that I needed to learn? Third, what qualities does this obstacle strengthen that I'll need later? These questions activate what psychologists call cognitive reappraisal, the ability to change how we interpret situations, which literally changes our emotional response to them. Let's see how this works in modern contexts. When your flight is delayed, instead of focusing on the inconvenience, ask, what does this delay make possible? Perhaps time to read, make important calls, or simply practice patience. When technology fails during an important presentation, ask, what does this teach me? Perhaps the value of backup plans, adaptability, or connecting with your audience without visual aids. When someone criticizes your work, ask, what qualities might this strengthen in me? Perhaps humility, discernment about feedback, or clearer communication. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't deny reality or suppress negative emotions. It simply adds a dimension of possibility that transforms how we experience challenges. I used to dread difficult conversations with my team, a manager told me. But when I started seeing them as opportunities to develop better communication skills and deeper understanding, these conversations became valuable rather than draining. The situations didn't change. My perspective did. To make this practice concrete, I recommend keeping what I call an obstacle transformation log. Whenever you face a significant challenge, document the obstacle itself, factually described, your initial emotional response. The 3 questions: what it makes possible, teaches, strengthens, the action you took based on this perspective, the results you observed. People who maintain this log for just 30 days report astonishing shifts in how they perceive difficulties. One participant noted, "I'm now almost curious when problems arise, not because I enjoy difficulties, but because I've seen so consistently how they lead to unexpected benefits." The neuroscience behind this practice is fascinating. When we view obstacles merely as barriers, our brains activate the amygdala, our threat response center, limiting access to our prefrontal cortex where creative problem solving occurs. By reframing obstacles as potential advantages, we literally change our brain chemistry, reducing stress hormones while increasing access to higher cognitive functions. A study at the University of California found that this type of cognitive reframing doesn't just feel better, it produces measurably better outcomes. Participants who practiced obstacle reframing demonstrated 58% greater creative problem-solving ability compared to those who approached problems conventionally. The obstacle is the way isn't just a nice philosophy, it's a practical framework for achieving results that would otherwise be impossible. Consider the story of an entrepreneur who lost his biggest client, representing 60% of his business revenue. Initially devastated, he applied the obstacle reframing questions and realized this situation created the opportunity to diversify his client base, something he'd known was necessary but had been too comfortable to pursue. Within 6 months, he had replaced the lost revenue with 5 new clients, creating a much more stable business model. Looking back, he shared, losing that client was the best thing that could have happened, though I certainly couldn't see it at the time. The power of this approach becomes even more evident in personal challenges. One woman described how a serious health diagnosis initially seemed like the end of everything important to her. But when I started asking what this made possible, what it might teach, and what it might strengthen, my entire experience transformed. I discovered priorities, relationships, and inner resources I never knew I had. The illness remains difficult, but it's no longer just a tragedy. It's also a pathway to a depth of living I hadn't experienced before. To integrate this practice into your daily life, start with smaller annoyances before applying it to major challenges. The person who cut you off in traffic, the long line at the store, the unexpected change in plans, these minor irritations provide perfect training grounds for developing your obstacle reframing muscles. For each small annoyance, practice saying to yourself, "This is happening for me, not to me. What's the opportunity here?" As you build this mental habit with smaller challenges, you'll find it becomes increasingly available during significant difficulties, precisely when you need it most. A crucial distinction. This isn't about pretending problems are good or denying their difficulty. It's about extracting value from them regardless of their inherent nature. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. The Stoics weren't naive optimists. They were practical realists who understood that obstacles are inevitable. Their innovation was recognizing that our response to obstacles determines their ultimate impact on our lives. To make this even more concrete, let's practice with a common modern scenario. Imagine you've prepared extensively for an important meeting, only to discover upon arrival that the client has completely different expectations than what was communicated. The conventional response, frustration, anxiety, blame, either of yourself, your team, or the client. The Stoic response, what stands in the way becomes the way. This situation now becomes a teacher of better pre-meeting communication, a test of your adaptability and presence, an opportunity to demonstrate responsive problem-solving rather than rigid adherence to plans. By applying these three transformations, you haven't changed the external reality, but you've completely transformed your relationship to it and significantly increased your likelihood of a positive outcome. This is exactly how Marcus Aurelius maintained his effectiveness through 19 years of nearly constant crisis. The obstacles didn't disappear, they became his way forward. As you practice this approach, you'll notice something remarkable. You'll begin seeking the advantage in difficulties automatically, without conscious effort. What begins as a deliberate practice becomes a default mental pattern. After about 3 weeks of consistent practice, one person reported, I caught myself automatically looking for the opportunity in a problem before I even felt the frustration. It was as if my mind had rewired itself to see obstacles differently. This is precisely what modern neuroscience confirms. Consistent mental practices create new neural pathways. Through repetition, the obstacle is the way becomes not just something you believe, but how you naturally think. The most powerful application of this principle comes during major life transitions, job loss, relationship endings, relocations, health challenges. These moments, which can seem like pure setbacks, often contain the seeds of profound transformation. By asking, how is this obstacle the way forward, rather than, why is this happening to me? You activate completely different mental and emotional processes. The first question leads to creative action, the second to victimhood and stagnation. One participant in our Stoic practice group faced unexpected job loss after 15 years with the same company. Rather than seeing only disaster, he asked what this obstacle made possible. The answer led him to finally start the consulting business he'd been considering for years, but was too comfortable to pursue. 2 years later, he described the layoff as the push I needed to find work that actually aligned with my values and strengths. To implement this practice immediately, first, choose one current obstacle in your life. Second, write down at least 3 ways this obstacle could actually be your way forward. Third, identify one specific action you can take based on this reframing. The results of this simple exercise can be immediate and profound. As one practitioner put it, it's like putting on glasses that suddenly bring everything into focus. The obstacle doesn't disappear, but I can see through it to possibilities I was completely blind to before. Remember, Marcus Aurelius developed this approach while facing challenges far greater than most of us will ever encounter. If it worked for maintaining an empire during plague and war, it can certainly transform our everyday obstacles. The next time you face a problem, whether small annoyance or significant crisis, pause and remind yourself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Then watch as obstacles transform from barriers into bridges. But the true power of Stoicism appears when you learn the technique that Epictetus used to conquer his most intense emotions. This master teacher, who experienced slavery and disability, taught a simple 4-word technique that instantly calms anger, anxiety, or frustration. This approach is so powerful that modern therapists have rediscovered it and consider it revolutionary for interrupting negative emotional patterns. I'll show you exactly how to use it the next time your emotions threaten to overwhelm your reason. You know that feeling when someone says something and you instantly feel your blood pressure rising? Your face gets hot, your thoughts race, and before you know it, you're saying things you'll regret later. We've all been there, whether it's a cutting comment from a colleague, an inconsiderate driver cutting you off, or that particularly triggering message from a family member. These emotional reactions happen so quickly that they often feel inevitable. But what if I told you that Epictetus, a man who spent his early years as a slave and later suffered physical disability, developed a technique so simple yet powerful that it can interrupt this emotional cascade before it overtakes you? It is not events that disturb people, Epictetus taught, but their judgments about events. This insight, that our distress comes not from what happens, but from our interpretation of what happens, is perhaps the most revolutionary psychological discovery in human history. And Epictetus distilled it into a practice so straightforward that you can use it in 4 words. This technique is what I call the power of objective description, the practice of separating raw facts from your interpretations about those facts. It sounds simple, but its impact on your emotional life can be profound. Here's how it works. When you feel yourself becoming emotionally triggered, pause and say to yourself, "This is just factual description." For example, instead of thinking, "My boss disrespected me in that meeting," an interpretation, you would say, "My boss disagreed with my suggestion," a fact. Instead of, "That driver is an inconsiderate jerk," interpretation, you'd say, "That car moved into my lane," fact. Instead of, "My friend is ignoring my needs," interpretation, you'd say, "My friend hasn't responded to my message," fact. Do you see the difference? The first statement in each pair contains an emotional judgment that triggers your stress response. The second contains only objective information and leaves your rational mind in control. Let's try this right now. Think of a recent situation that frustrated or upset you. Got it? Now strip away all interpretations and judgments. What actually, factually happened? Not what it meant, not what it says about you or others, not why it happened, just the bare, observable facts. This isn't easy at first. Our minds automatically add layers of meaning to everything we experience. But with practice, you can learn to separate fact from interpretation. And in that separation lies tremendous freedom. When I first tried this technique, one practitioner told me, I was skeptical that something so simple could help with my intense emotional reactions. But when I started consciously separating facts from interpretations, I realized how many of my strongest emotions were based on assumptions that might not even be true. The power of neutral language cannot be overstated. Notice how emotion-laden words intensify your reactions. When you describe someone's behavior as disrespectful, inconsiderate, or selfish, you're not just describing, you're interpreting, judging, and inflaming your own emotions. By contrast, neutral descriptions, she disagreed. He arrived 20 minutes after the agreed time. She chose a different approach. Keep you anchored in reality rather than swept away by interpretation. This practice becomes particularly valuable when dealing with digital communications, where misinterpretation runs rampant. When you receive a terse email or text message that seems rude, try this. Read only what's actually there, the factual content, not the tone you're adding or the intentions you're assuming. My colleague didn't acknowledge my contribution, fact, versus my colleague is trying to take credit for my work, interpretation. This email contains only the information requested, fact, versus this person is being cold and unhelpful, interpretation. A powerful variation of this technique is what I call the third-person perspective. When you're emotionally activated, try describing the situation as if you were a neutral observer reporting it to someone else. This creates psychological distance that enables clearer thinking. Instead of, I can't believe they rejected my proposal after all that work, try, a person submitted a proposal that wasn't accepted by the committee. This perspective shift activates different neural pathways in your brain, engaging your prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, rather than your amygdala, your brain's alarm system. One couple I worked with transformed their relationship using this technique. After years of escalating arguments, they learned to pause and objectively describe situations before reacting. He left his clothes on the floor, replaced, "He doesn't respect my need for order." She asked about my work schedule twice, replaced, "She doesn't trust me." The difference was immediate and dramatic, they reported. We still face the same situations that used to trigger fights, but we now have this buffer zone between event and reaction where we can choose how to respond. To build this skill systematically, try keeping what I call a facts versus interpretations journal for 1 week. Create 2 columns. In the left, write down situations that triggered emotional reactions. In the right, separate the objective facts from your interpretations. For example, situation: my friend didn't invite me to their gathering. Facts: a gathering took place. I didn't receive an invitation. Interpretations: my friend doesn't value our relationship. I'm being excluded intentionally. Others are more important to them than I am. When you make this distinction consistently, patterns emerge. You'll likely notice that many of your strongest emotional reactions come from interpretations that have limited evidence to support them. The neuroscience behind this practice is fascinating. When we experience events through a lens of negative interpretation, we activate our brain's threat response system, releasing stress hormones that impair rational thinking. By focusing on objective facts, we redirect neural activity to our prefrontal cortex, enabling clearer thought and more intentional responses. A study from the University of California found that people who practiced objective description showed a 63% faster recovery from emotional triggers compared to those who continued to process events through interpretative language. This approach proves especially valuable when receiving criticism or feedback. Instead of experiencing feedback as an attack on your identity, "I'm being told I'm incompetent," you can receive it as objective information. "I'm being given specific suggestions for improvement on this project." This single shift changed my entire relationship with professional feedback, one executive shared. What used to feel like personal attacks now register as valuable data. My defensive reactions have virtually disappeared. The technique extends naturally to how we consume news and social media. Much of what triggers strong emotional reactions in these domains isn't the factual content, but the interpretative framing. Practice identifying what's objectively happening versus the meaning being assigned to those events. For example, a headline might read, "Senator betrays campaign promises with shocking vote." The objective facts might simply be, "Senator voted differently than statements made during campaign." Notice how removing the interpretative language, "betrays," "shocking," changes your emotional response. One practitioner described this awareness as, like suddenly seeing the matrix code behind reality. You recognize how much of what appears to be what happened is actually interpretation layered onto what happened. To implement this practice immediately, start with low-stakes situations. The next time you feel a mild emotional reaction to something, pause and ask, "What are the objective facts here, separated from my interpretation?" With practice, you can scale this approach to more emotionally charged situations. The technique doesn't eliminate emotions, nor should it, as emotions provide valuable information, but it gives you a choice about how to respond to them. "I used to be completely controlled by my emotional reactions," one person shared. "Now I have this space between stimulus and response. The facts are still the facts, but I'm no longer at the mercy of my interpretations about those facts." Remember, this isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't have reactions. It's about recognizing that many of our strongest emotions come not from events themselves, but from the stories we tell about those events. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." To practice this skill until it becomes second nature, try what I call the Objective Description Challenge. For 1 week, whenever you feel emotionally triggered, pause and write down, or say aloud, just the objective facts of the situation. Make it a game to see how neutral and factual you can be. Over time, you'll develop what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking processes. You'll start catching yourself in the act of adding interpretations to facts, which gives you the power to choose different interpretations or simply to hold the facts lightly without immediately assigning meaning. This practice transforms not just individual emotional reactions, but your entire relationship with reality. Instead of living in a world where events are inherently negative or positive, threatening or supportive, you begin to see the distinction between what's happening and the meaning you assign to it. One practitioner described this shift. "It's like I was wearing tinted glasses my whole life without realizing it. This practice is like taking off those glasses and seeing things as they actually are, without the automatic coloring my mind adds. The results can be measured in very practical terms: reduced recovery time from emotional triggers, improved relationship communication, decreased anxiety, and better decision-making under pressure." "What surprised me most," shared one person, "wasn't just feeling better emotionally, but how much more effectively I began solving problems. When I stopped conflating facts with interpretations, I could see solutions that were previously hidden by my emotional reactions." This technique isn't about achieving some perfect state of objectivity. We are inherently meaning-making creatures. Rather, it's about developing the ability to recognize when we're adding interpretation to facts, giving us the freedom to choose how we frame our experiences. As you practice objective description, you'll find yourself less reactive to the small annoyances of daily life and more capable of maintaining perspective during significant challenges. Your relationships improve as you stop attributing negative intentions to others' actions. Your decisions become sounder as they're based more on reality than on interpretation. But while this technique works wonders for specific situations, the Stoics had a daily practice that transformed their entire perspective on life. Seneca used it every evening before sleep, a 5-minute exercise that dissolves worries, increases gratitude, and reprograms your brain to find opportunities. People who apply this technique report profound changes in just 10 days. I'll show you exactly how to implement this practice to transform not just moments of emotional reactivity, but your entire outlook on life. Imagine being able to zoom out from any problem and instantly see it for what it really is. That perspective shift might seem magical, but it's actually a skill the Stoics deliberately practiced every day. Marcus Aurelius, even while managing the pressures of the Roman Empire, had a powerful evening ritual where he would step outside his palace to gaze at the stars. This wasn't just a poetic habit, it was a deliberate psychological technique. Think of the whole universe of matter and how small your share. Think about the expanse of time and how brief, almost momentary, the part marked for you, Marcus wrote in his private journal. This wasn't an exercise in feeling insignificant, but rather a practical tool for gaining freedom from the tyranny of narrow perspective. Let me guide you through this practice step by step. I call it the 3-level zoom out, and it works by progressively expanding your perspective from the immediate situation to your entire life, and finally to the cosmic scale. Try this right now with something that's been bothering you lately. First, identify the problem. Maybe a work conflict, a relationship difficulty, or a personal setback. Got it in mind? Good. Level 1. See the situation in the context of this week. Ask yourself, how important will this seem 5 days from now? What other positive elements exist in my life alongside this problem? Level 2. Zoom out to your entire lifespan. Will this matter in 5 years? How might this fit into the larger story of your life? What previous disasters now seem insignificant with time? Level 3. Expand to the cosmic perspective. Imagine viewing Earth from space, seeing billions of lives unfolding simultaneously. Your problem still exists, but notice how it naturally resizes itself when viewed from this expanded perspective. This exercise completely transformed how I handle stress, shared a healthcare worker who implemented this practice. A patient complaint that would have ruined my entire day now registers as just one event in a much larger context. I still address it seriously, but without the emotional overwhelm that used to drain my energy. This isn't about minimizing genuine challenges. It's about accurately sizing them. Think of it like adjusting the zoom on a camera to capture the complete picture rather than being stuck on a distorted close-up. One of the most practical applications of this perspective shift is what I call the 5-year question. When facing a decision or worrying about a problem, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? In 5 months? In 5 weeks? This simple series of questions instantly calibrates your emotional response to match the actual significance of the situation. I was obsessing over a presentation mistake for days until I applied the 5-year question, a professional told me. The moment I realized that no one, including me, would remember this in just 5 months, let alone 5 years, the emotional grip it had on me immediately loosened. The reduction of scale, visualizing Earth from space, works with remarkable effectiveness for recalibrating worries. Astronauts call this the overview effect, the cognitive shift that occurs when viewing Earth from orbit. Studies show that this perspective literally changes how the brain processes problems, activating regions associated with higher-level thinking while quieting the amygdala, our threat detection center. You don't need to go to space to benefit from this shift. Simply taking a moment to visualize our planet, one of billions in our galaxy alone, creates enough psychological distance to see our concerns more accurately. This perspective enabled one business leader to navigate what initially seemed like a career-ending crisis. When an important project failed publicly, his first reaction was panic and shame. But when I applied the cosmic perspective, I realized that in the grand scheme, this was just one small event in one career, in one lifetime on one planet. This wasn't toxic positivity. The problem was still real. But the perspective shift gave me the emotional stability to respond effectively rather than reactively. Within 6 months, he had leveraged the lessons from that failure into a more successful approach that actually advanced his career. What seemed like a disaster became a turning point, but only because the perspective shift allowed me to see it as such. The Stoics incorporated another dimension to this practice through what they called memento mori, the remembrance of mortality. This wasn't morbid fixation, but a gentle reminder of life's finite nature that instantly clarifies priorities. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life, Seneca advised. When we are drawing our last breath, we can't showcase our empty levity anymore. Try this gentle version of the practice. If you had just 5 years left, still a significant time, but with a visible horizon, would you still be focusing on what currently occupies your attention? Would your priorities shift? What would suddenly become more important or less important? This reflection doesn't make me anxious, explains someone who practices this regularly. Instead, it's incredibly liberating. Traffic jams, minor conflicts, and daily irritations naturally resize themselves when viewed against the backdrop of a finite life. A powerful variation is what I call the legacy exercise. When facing an important choice or struggling with priorities, ask yourself, what will truly matter in the end? Not in a vague, abstract way, but specifically, what will you want to have created, contributed, or experienced when looking back on your life? This perspective is particularly valuable for decision-making. When torn between options, the expanded view often reveals which choice aligns with your deeper values, rather than just immediate concerns. One person described using this technique when deciding whether to accept a higher-paying job that would require significant travel away from family. From the immediate perspective, the salary increase seemed important. From the 5-year perspective, the time lost with my children during these key years became more visible. From the legacy perspective, the decision became crystal clear. No amount of money would compensate for those irreplaceable moments. To integrate this practice systematically, try keeping what I call a perspective journal. Each evening, take just 2 minutes to write about one situation from your day viewed through all 3 levels of perspective: immediate, lifespan, and cosmic. Notice how the situation transforms as you expand the frame. The neurological impact of this practice is profound. Regular perspective-taking activates and strengthens the brain's posterior cingulate cortex, a region associated with self-awareness and broader thinking. Studies show that people who regularly practice perspective expansion demonstrate 42% greater life satisfaction and significantly improved decision-making compared to those who remain trapped in narrow viewpoints. A powerful extension of this practice is what psychologists call the observer technique, viewing your own life as if you were watching someone else's story unfold. This creates psychological distance that enables greater wisdom and compassion toward yourself. Try this. Think of a current challenge you're facing, but imagine it's happening to a good friend rather than to you. What advice would you give them? What perspectives might you offer that they can't see because they're too close to the situation? I was amazed to discover how much wiser I could be about my own problems when I viewed them as if they were happening to someone else, shared a person who regularly practices this technique. The solutions I'd offer a friend were invariably more balanced, compassionate, and effective than the catastrophic thinking I applied to myself. The beauty of perspective practice is that it becomes more automatic over time. After 21 days of consistent practice, participants report that perspective expansion begins happening spontaneously during stressful situations. The mind naturally zooms out without conscious effort. I was in a heated argument when suddenly, almost like a reflex, my mind stepped back and I could see the whole situation from a broader view, one practitioner reported. The anger didn't instantly vanish, but it resized itself appropriately, allowing me to respond with clarity rather than just emotion. This doesn't mean you'll never feel stress or strong emotions. The Stoics never aimed to eliminate feelings, only to ensure they were proportionate and didn't cloud judgment. Perspective practice doesn't remove appropriate emotional responses. It simply prevents them from becoming exaggerated and overwhelming. The most profound benefit of regular perspective practice is what researchers call eudaimonic well-being, a sense of meaning and purpose that transcends momentary happiness. When we regularly view our lives from expanded perspectives, we naturally align our actions with deeper values rather than fleeting concerns. Before practicing perspective expansion, I measured my days by how many items I checked off my to-do list, one person shared. Now I evaluate them by how well my actions aligned with what will truly matter in the larger story of my life. The shift has been transformative. To implement this practice immediately, start with just one perspective shift per day. When you feel stressed or overwhelmed by a situation, pause and consciously expand your view, first to your whole life, then to the cosmic scale. Notice how the problem doesn't disappear, but naturally resizes itself when seen in proper proportion. As you continue this practice, you'll develop what the Stoics called the view from above, the ability to see your life simultaneously from both the immediate perspective and the expanded one. This dual awareness allows you to address daily concerns effectively while maintaining connection to what truly matters. "It's like having a split-screen view," described one long-term practitioner. "I can fully engage with immediate tasks while maintaining awareness of their place in the larger context of my life and the world. This keeps me from becoming either detached from daily responsibilities or consumed by them." The perspective practice doesn't require long meditation sessions or retreats from daily life. It can be integrated in moments, while waiting in line, commuting, or taking a short break. Even a 30-second perspective expansion can reset your mental state and reconnect you with a wiser viewpoint. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How small a part of the boundless and unfathomable time is assigned to every man, for it is very soon swallowed up in the eternal." This wasn't meant to depress, but to liberate, to free us from the tyranny of narrow thinking that magnifies problems beyond their true significance. While the cosmic perspective transforms your mind, the Stoics knew that philosophy without action is empty. That's why they practiced what they called ascesis, a set of practical exercises that strengthened not just ideas, but real behaviors. Epictetus had a specific exercise that began with a simple glass of water, and that can completely change your relationship with comfort and discomfort. Have you noticed how irritated we get when we lose even the smallest comforts, like when the Wi-Fi slows down or the air conditioning breaks on a hot day? It's fascinating how quickly our mood can change when something we expect to work suddenly doesn't. We've become so accustomed to comfort that the slightest disruption feels like a genuine crisis. This modern reality would not surprise Seneca, who, despite being one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced voluntary discomfort. Historical accounts tell us that this renowned Stoic philosopher would deliberately sleep on a hard mattress even though he could afford the finest bedding in Rome. In the dead of winter, he would sometimes bathe in cold water when warm baths were readily available to him. Was Seneca practicing some form of ancient masochism? Not at all. He understood a profound psychological truth that we've largely forgotten. Constant comfort weakens us, while strategic discomfort strengthens our resilience. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with rough and coarse clothing, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" Seneca wrote in his letters. He wasn't punishing himself. He was training his mind to remain stable regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics recognized what modern psychology now confirms. There's a paradox of comfort in human experience. The more comfortable our lives become, the less capable we are of handling even minor discomforts. Our tolerance for inconvenience, delay, and difficulty diminishes precisely because we encounter these experiences so rarely. Think about it. When was the last time you went a full day without climate control, instant digital entertainment, or your favorite foods? Most of us rarely experience even mild discomfort anymore. Yet when forced to do so, when the power goes out or the internet fails, our reaction is often disproportionately negative. Fortunately, the Stoics developed a systematic approach to counter this weakness, a practice they called voluntary discomfort. Today, I want to show you how to implement this ancient practice in your modern life to build psychological resilience and emotional strength. Let's start with some immediate practical exercises you can try today. First, take a cold shower, or at least end your regular shower with 30 seconds of cold water. Notice your initial resistance and how quickly your body actually adapts. Second, try intermittent fasting. Skip breakfast or lunch once this week and observe the difference between actual hunger and mere appetite. Third, take a walk without your phone. Leave it at home completely and experience the world without digital connection for even just 30 minutes. These might sound trivial compared to the challenges Stoics like Epictetus faced, but they serve the same psychological purpose: They train your mind to remain composed when deprived of expected comforts. The first time I tried ending my shower with cold water, I literally counted down the seconds, one practitioner told me. By the third week, I found myself almost enjoying the sensation. More importantly, I noticed I was significantly less rattled by other discomforts throughout my day. The Stoic approach to discomfort follows a deliberate progression through 3 levels of challenge: physical discomforts, social discomforts, and mental discomforts. Physical discomforts are the easiest to practice. Simple things like temporarily abstaining from pleasures, enduring minor physical hardships, or delaying gratification. These build your basic discomfort muscles. Social discomforts might include speaking up in groups when you'd rather stay silent, asking for help when you feel embarrassed, or standing by an unpopular but correct position. These build your resilience to social pressure and rejection. Mental discomforts involve challenging your own thinking, deliberately considering opposing viewpoints, questioning your assumptions, or contemplating your own mortality. These build intellectual flexibility and emotional perspective. Let me suggest a simple challenge to begin this practice. Choose one comfort to voluntarily go without for 24 hours. Perhaps it's social media, snacking between meals, or complaining about anything. Whatever you choose, the key is to observe your mind's reaction to the deprivation. Notice the initial resistance, the moments of forgetting and catching yourself, and any insights that emerge from the experience. "I decided to go 24 hours without complaining," shared one person who tried this practice. "I was shocked to discover how often negative observations were on the tip of my tongue. By the end of the day, I realized how much of my mental energy was being wasted on pointless criticism of things I couldn't change." What makes voluntary discomfort particularly powerful for managing anxiety is that it directly addresses the fear of discomfort that underlies most anxiety disorders. When you voluntarily experience discomfort in controlled doses, you literally retrain your brain to be less fearful of discomfort in general. Think of a person who's afraid of public speaking. Their fear isn't just about judgment. It's about the discomfort of vulnerability, potential embarrassment, and feeling exposed. By practicing smaller voluntary discomforts, they build the general psychological resilience needed to face their specific fear. One executive I worked with had paralyzing anxiety about speaking to large groups. Rather than starting with public speaking itself, he began with a series of voluntary discomforts: cold showers, fasting 1 day per week, and deliberately leaving his phone at home during important meetings. After 6 weeks of this practice, he reported that his public speaking anxiety had decreased significantly. "The physical discomfort somehow trained my system to handle the emotional discomfort of being on stage," he explained. "I realized that discomfort is just a sensation, intense sometimes, but always temporary." The beauty of this practice is that it can be integrated into daily life through what I call micro-challenges, small moments of voluntary discomfort that cumulatively build resilience. Here are some you can try. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Wait to check your phone when you feel the urge. Eat a meal without any distractions, no TV, phone, or reading material. Sit in silence for 5 minutes doing nothing. Have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. To track your growth with this practice, keep what I call a resilience journal. Each time you deliberately practice discomfort, document your experience. What did you do? What was your initial reaction? How did it feel afterward? Over time, you'll see a clear progression in your tolerance for discomfort. The science behind this practice is fascinating. Biologists call it hormesis, the phenomenon where exposure to low doses of stressors that would be harmful at higher doses actually produces beneficial effects. Just as muscles grow stronger when exposed to the stress of resistance training, your psychological resilience grows when exposed to manageable discomforts. Research shows that controlled exposure to cold, hunger, physical exertion, and even certain social stresses activates cellular protection mechanisms and improves systemic resilience. Your body and mind literally become stronger through strategically applied stress. This principle has powerful applications for breaking negative habits. Many destructive patterns, from procrastination to addiction, are essentially attempts to avoid discomfort. By deliberately practicing discomfort in controlled ways, you build the capacity to withstand the temporary discomfort of breaking these patterns. I realized my social media addiction was really about avoiding the discomfort of boredom or being alone with my thoughts, one practitioner told me. After 3 weeks of practicing voluntary discomfort in other areas, I found I could sit with the urge to check my phone without acting on it. That small ability changed everything. To systematically expand your comfort zone, try mapping it first. Draw 3 concentric circles representing your comfort zone, what feels easy, your growth zone, what feels challenging but manageable, and your panic zone, what feels overwhelming. Choose activities from your growth zone to practice regularly, gradually expanding what feels comfortable. The results of consistent practice are measurable and significant. Studies show that people who regularly engage in voluntary discomfort demonstrate a 51% increase in their ability to handle stressful situations compared to those who prioritize comfort. More importantly, this increased resilience transfers across domains. Physical discomfort practice improves emotional resilience, and social discomfort practice enhances performance under pressure in professional settings. After just 1 month of ending showers with cold water and occasionally fasting until dinner, I noticed I was handling work stress completely differently, reported one professional. The same situations that would have sent me spiraling now seemed manageable. Nothing had changed except my relationship with discomfort. One crucial aspect of this practice is maintaining the right mindset. Voluntary discomfort isn't about punishment or proving toughness, it's about freedom. Each discomfort you can calmly endure represents one less external condition required for your well-being. As Epictetus taught, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. The ultimate goal isn't to live an uncomfortable life. It's to develop such resilience that your well-being is no longer dependent on external comforts. The Stoics weren't ascetics who rejected pleasure. They were pragmatists who understood that depending on comfort for happiness creates vulnerability. To integrate this practice into your life starting today, begin with what I call the minimum effective dose of discomfort, the smallest challenge that pushes your comfort boundaries. This ensures you build the habit of voluntary discomfort without triggering excessive resistance. For most people, this might be as simple as delaying a pleasure you'd normally indulge in immediately. When you feel hungry, wait 30 minutes before eating. When you want to check social media, delay for 15 minutes. These small exercises in impulse control build the foundation for greater resilience. Remember that the Stoics practiced discomfort not as an end in itself, but as a means to freedom. As Seneca wrote, "I am not so shameless as to undertake to cure while I am sick myself." He recognized that his own practice of voluntary discomfort was therapeutic. It healed the weakness that constant luxury had created in his character. The most powerful application of voluntary discomfort comes when you face unwelcome challenges in life. When you've trained through voluntary discomfort, you approach involuntary hardships with a completely different mindset. Instead of thinking, "Why is this happening to me?" you think, "This is uncomfortable, but I've trained for discomfort." This shift transforms victims into warriors, people who may not welcome hardship, but are prepared to face it with equanimity and effectiveness. While discomfort voluntary strengthens your resilience, there is an even more transformative practice that Epictetus called the secret of happiness. He taught that it's not people with the most things who are happy, but those who have mastered a specific skill, the ability to want what they already have. I'll show you how a simple 7-minute exercise can reprogram your desires and transform your experience of everyday life. Imagine if you could find peace, not just despite your circumstances, but because of them. This isn't some mystical state reserved for monks on mountaintops. It's a practical mindset that the Stoics cultivated through deliberate practice. And perhaps no one expressed this idea more powerfully than Marcus Aurelius, who on his deathbed, suffering from what historians believe was smallpox or the plague, reportedly said to his attendants, "Live happy with what comes." These weren't empty words from someone who'd lived a charmed life. Marcus had endured wars, betrayals, plagues, and the deaths of 8 of his children. Yet he had cultivated something remarkable, the capacity to not merely tolerate whatever life brought, but to actively embrace it. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but loving what happens. Not just enduring challenges, but welcoming them. Not just making the best of things, but recognizing that what happens is the best thing that could happen, if only we have the wisdom to see it. This might sound like passive resignation at first, simply giving up and accepting whatever comes. But that's a profound misunderstanding of the Stoic approach. There's a crucial difference between passive resignation and what the Stoics practiced: active, creative acceptance. Passive resignation says, "I can't change this, so I'll just suffer through it." Active acceptance says, "Since this has happened, how can I work with it creatively? What value might be hidden here?" Let me demonstrate the difference with a simple exercise. Think of something in your life right now that you wish were different, a situation you've been resisting or fighting against. Got it? Now, just for a moment, try asking yourself this question. What if this is exactly what I need right now? I'm not asking you to believe this is true, just to entertain the possibility. What if this challenging situation, this unwanted circumstance, is precisely what your development requires at this moment? This simple mental shift doesn't change the external facts, but it radically transforms your relationship to them. It moves you from the position of victim to the position of student, someone who can extract value from any situation. When I first tried this with my difficult work situation, one person told me, it felt like pretending. But when I genuinely asked what this challenge might be teaching me, I realized it was forcing me to develop assertiveness skills I'd been avoiding my entire career. The situation was still difficult, but my relationship to it completely transformed. To practice amor fati effectively, I recommend a 3-step approach: accept, seek value, and respond creatively. First, accept the reality of what is happening without resistance. This doesn't mean you approve of it or wouldn't change it if you could. It simply means you stop arguing with reality. As the ancient Stoics understood, fighting against what has already happened is the primary source of unnecessary suffering. Second, actively seek the potential value in the situation. Ask yourself, what might this situation be offering me? What strength might it be building? What lesson might it contain? Third, respond creatively to what has happened. Based on your acceptance and the value you've identified, how can you work with this situation rather than merely endure it? This approach proves especially powerful when dealing with disappointments, those moments when reality fails to meet our expectations. Instead of dwelling on how things should have been, the practice of amor fati directs our attention to the opportunities created by what actually is. Try this 7-day experiment. Each evening, identify one unwanted situation from your day. It could be small, like a traffic delay, or more significant, like a rejected proposal or a difficult conversation. For each situation, complete these 3 sentences. This happened, and I accept that it cannot be undone. A potential value in this situation might be: One way I can work creatively with this reality is, I was skeptical that this simple exercise could change anything, one practitioner shared. But after just 7 days, I noticed my mind automatically looking for the hidden opportunities in unwanted situations. The mental shift from "why is this happening to me?" to "what might this be offering me?" completely transformed my daily experience. The transformative power of this approach is perhaps best illustrated by those who have applied it to significant life challenges. One person described how a serious health diagnosis initially felt like the worst possible news. But when I began practicing amor fati, not pretending to be happy about the diagnosis, but looking for what it might offer, I discovered a depth of appreciation for life I'd never known before. My priorities clarified instantly, relationships deepened. I started living with an authenticity that had previously eluded me. This wasn't toxic positivity or denial of difficulty. The health challenge remained real and unwanted. But the practice of amor fati revealed dimensions of value that would have remained hidden had the person remained locked in resistance to reality. An especially powerful technique within this practice is what I call re-narration, the process of creating new stories about past events that highlight the value they've ultimately delivered. This isn't about denying negative experiences or pretending everything happens for the best. It's about recognizing that the meaning of events often changes dramatically when viewed through the lens of time. Think about something difficult from your past that ultimately led to positive developments in your life. Perhaps a relationship ending that freed you for a better one. A job loss that pushed you toward more meaningful work. A failure that taught a crucial lesson. The events themselves didn't change, but their meaning transformed completely when viewed from a different time perspective. Try keeping what I call a reversal journal, documenting instances where initial problems eventually revealed themselves as benefits. This creates a personal evidence base that helps your mind recognize the pattern. What initially appears negative often contains hidden value. The neuroscience behind acceptance is fascinating. Studies show that fighting against reality, wishing things were different than they are, activates the brain's stress response, releasing cortisol and other inflammatory compounds that impair cognitive function and damage physical health. By contrast, acceptance practices reduce inflammatory markers and improve immune function. Your body literally operates better when your mind accepts reality as it is. This doesn't mean you never work to change things. The Stoics were people of vigorous action. But they understood a crucial principle. Effective action begins with complete acceptance of current reality. You can only change what you first accept. When facing loss, whether of opportunities, relationships, or capabilities, the practice of amor fati offers a particularly powerful framework. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" which often has no satisfying answer, it directs us toward, "What meaning can I create from this?" Viktor Frankl, though not a Stoic philosopher, captured this idea perfectly when he wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This isn't surrender. It's transformation." An advanced application of amor fati is what I call anticipatory acceptance, developing the capacity to accept what might come before it arrives. This isn't worry or pessimism. It's the mental preparation to receive whatever life brings with equanimity and creativity. Marcus Aurelius practiced this when he wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" This wasn't because he was negative. It was because he was preparing his mind to transform whatever came into opportunity. Try this brief exercise. For just 30 seconds, imagine yourself responding with creative acceptance to unexpected changes in your plans today. See yourself not merely enduring disruptions, but finding the hidden value in them. This brief mental rehearsal programs your brain to respond more adaptively when actual challenges arise. The results of practicing amor fati are measurable and significant. Studies show that people who cultivate acceptance experience 39% fewer symptoms of anxiety compared to those who habitually resist unwanted circumstances. Their problem-solving capabilities improve, their relationships deepen, and their subjective well-being increases. The most surprising benefit, one longtime practitioner told me, is how much mental energy I recovered. I hadn't realized how much of my life force was being consumed by fighting against reality until I stopped doing it. The same challenges are still there, but they no longer drain me in the same way. This practice doesn't promise a life without difficulties. The Stoics would consider such a promise absurd. What it offers instead is a transformed relationship to difficulty. Challenges become material for growth rather than obstacles to happiness. Problems become opportunities for practice rather than interruptions of peace. As Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This isn't passive fatalism. It's active engagement with reality exactly as it is, the only reality with which we can ever engage. The beauty of amor fati is that it can be practiced at any moment, in any circumstance. Whether facing a minor inconvenience or a major life challenge, the question remains the same. How can I not merely accept this, but find the hidden value within it? This doesn't mean pretending that painful things aren't painful. The Stoics weren't advocating denial of human feeling. Rather, they recognized that our experience of any event consists of both the event itself and our interpretation of it. While we often can't control events, we always have a choice about interpretation. The true power of amor fati emerges not in isolated incidents, but as a consistent practice over time. As this mindset becomes your default approach to life's challenges, you'll find yourself less reactive to unwanted circumstances and more capable of extracting value from whatever comes your way. However, the true secret of the Stoics wasn't just in what they thought, but in what they systematically did. They had a daily practice that Marcus Aurelius called the examination of conscience, a three-question process that transforms abstract philosophy into concrete change. People who adopt this practice report that in just 30 days, they see transformations that years of reading and study never provided. I'll show you exactly how to implement this system to convert philosophical understanding into practical wisdom that transforms how you navigate life's challenges. You've noticed how sometimes we know exactly what we should do, but still can't seem to make ourselves do it. This gap between knowledge and action is one of the most frustrating aspects of personal growth. We read books, watch videos like this one, listen to podcasts, and gather all this wisdom. Yet when the moment comes to apply it, we often fall back into old patterns. The Stoics understood this challenge deeply. Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero, arguably history's worst boss, wrote candidly about his own struggles. "I am not so shameless as to undertake to cure while I am sick myself." He recognized that philosophical knowledge without practical application was merely intellectual entertainment. This is why Seneca developed a powerful evening ritual that transformed abstract philosophy into lived wisdom. Each night before sleep, he would reflect on his day through a specific set of questions. "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent," he wrote, "I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This wasn't self-punishment or dwelling on mistakes. It was a structured practice to convert experiences into wisdom, what the Stoics called the examination of conscience. The brilliance of the Stoic approach lies in its systematic structure. Rather than vague reflection, they developed a practical framework that transforms philosophy into action through daily review and preparation. Let's break this down into a complete system you can begin implementing today. The Stoic examination consists of 3 distinct components: a morning preparation, a midday check-in, and an evening review. Each serves a specific purpose in the cycle of philosophical practice. The morning preparation sets your intentions and anticipates challenges. Before engaging with the world, and especially before checking your phone, ask yourself, what might challenge my peace today, and how will I respond? This isn't pessimism, it's strategic preparation. Imagine taking just 2 minutes each morning to identify potential challenges in your day. A difficult conversation with a colleague, a project deadline, traffic during your commute. For each one, decide in advance how you'll respond in accordance with your values. When I started doing this, one practitioner told me, I realized I'd been starting each day reactive rather than intentional. This simple morning question completely shifted my relationship with daily challenges. Try this right now. Think about one potentially difficult situation you might face tomorrow. Instead of hoping it won't happen, decide specifically how you'll respond if it does. Feel the difference this mental preparation creates. The midday check-in serves as a course correction. Around noon, take just 60 seconds to realign with your Stoic principles. Ask yourself, am I acting in accordance with my values? Have I been swept away by external events? This brief pause interrupts the momentum of reactivity that often builds throughout the day. It's like resetting your mental compass when you notice you're drifting off course. One business leader described implementing this practice during his lunch break. I was amazed at how often I discovered I'd been completely swept up in urgency and reactivity during the morning. That 60-second reset completely changed the quality of my afternoon. The evening review completes the cycle and generates the insights that fuel growth. This is where Seneca's practice shines. Each night he asked himself 3 specific questions. What did I do well today? Acknowledging progress and reinforcing positive actions. What could I have done better? Identifying areas for improvement without shame. What will I do differently tomorrow? Converting insights into specific intentions. The power of these questions lies in their balanced approach. They acknowledge successes while identifying improvements, and they convert reflection into future action. This isn't rumination on the past, but preparation for growth. To implement this practice effectively, I recommend creating a simple Stoic journal template with these 3 questions. Spend just 5 minutes each evening writing brief answers. The act of writing externalizes your thinking, making patterns more visible and commitments more concrete. For beginners, I suggest this simplified format. Morning. Today, I might face challenges with. I will respond by. Midday. Am I living according to my values? Where have I been reactive? Evening. Today I did well at how I could improve. Tomorrow I will. The journal transformed everything, shared someone who implemented this practice. Before, my philosophical insights would evaporate when faced with real-world pressure. The daily writing created a feedback loop that gradually aligned my automatic responses with my deeper values. A powerful enhancement to this system is identifying specific triggers for practicing Stoic principles. These are recurring situations where you tend to react contrary to your philosophical intentions, perhaps traffic jams, criticism from specific people, or technology failures. For each trigger, develop a specific Stoic response plan. When stuck in traffic, practice acceptance and use the time for reflection. When criticized, separate facts from interpretations. When technology fails, practice the reserve clause. I will complete this task, fate permitting. The beauty of this approach is how it converts philosophical ideas from abstract concepts into concrete behavioral patterns that activate precisely when needed. One person described how this transformed their life. I'd been trying to be more stoic for years, but it remained a vague aspiration. When I started identifying specific triggers and practicing specific responses, everything changed. Philosophy became something I did, not just something I knew about. The method of tracking progress is crucial here, but with an important Stoic twist: track without judgment. Record your practices and responses factually, without labeling yourself as good or bad at Stoicism. This creates the psychological safety needed for honest reflection while avoiding the trap of perfectionism. My daily examination showed that I was applying Stoic principles about 60% of the time, one practitioner shared. Instead of feeling discouraged about the 40% gap, I became curious about the patterns. When did I struggle most? What specific circumstances triggered non-Stoic responses? This curiosity-based tracking accelerated my growth far more than self-criticism would have. The science behind structured reflection is compelling. Studies on metacognition, thinking about thinking, show that this type of structured review builds self-awareness and self-regulation more effectively than almost any other practice. The neural pathways for desired responses literally strengthen through consistent review and planning. Research from behavioral psychology confirms that specific implementation intentions, if X happens, I will do Y, increase follow-through by over 70% compared to general intentions. I will be more patient. The Stoic examination creates these implementation intentions systematically. The examination practice proves particularly powerful for identifying and changing negative habits. Through daily review, patterns become visible that might otherwise remain unconscious. I never realized how often I complained until I started tracking it in my evening review, one person noted. Once I saw the pattern, I could develop specific strategies to change it. The visualization technique embedded within the Stoic examination is another powerful component. During your morning preparation, briefly visualize yourself responding ideally to anticipated challenges. This creates mental rehearsal that primes your brain for desired responses later. Try this now. Close your eyes for just 10 seconds and visualize yourself responding calmly and purposefully to a situation that typically triggers reactivity. This brief mental rehearsal strengthens neural pathways for your ideal response. When implementing the examination, consistency matters more than duration. Research on habit formation shows that a 5-minute practice done daily creates more lasting change than an hour-long practice done occasionally. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus advised his students to practice these principles every day rather than writing large books about them. One practitioner described their experience. I was spending hours reading about Stoicism, but struggling to apply it. When I switched to just 5 minutes of morning preparation and 5 minutes of evening review, everything changed. The daily consistency transformed abstract ideas into intuitive responses. If you find the full 3-part examination overwhelming at first, start with just the evening review. Those 3 simple questions: what went well, what could improve, what I'll do differently, create a complete feedback loop that gradually enhances your application of Stoic principles. For those already practicing, consider adding what I call the reversed visualization technique to your evening review. First, imagine how your day would have unfolded had you responded perfectly to each situation according to Stoic principles. Then, compare this ideal day with your actual experience. This contrast creates clear awareness of specific opportunities for growth. The measurable results of consistent examination practice are remarkable. Studies show that people who implement structured daily reflection demonstrate 67% greater consistency in adopting new practices compared to those who merely learn concepts without reviewing application. What surprised me most, one longtime practitioner shared, wasn't just improved responses to difficult situations. but how the examination practice gradually transformed my automatic reactions. What once required conscious effort eventually became my natural way of perceiving and responding. This transformation represents the ultimate goal of Stoic practice, not just knowing philosophical principles, but embodying them so completely that they become your default operating system. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Such as are your habitual thoughts, such also will be the character of your mind, for the soul is dyed by the thoughts." The examination practice is the daily process by which these philosophical ideas gradually dye the soul, transforming intellectual understanding into lived wisdom. All these individual practices are powerful, but the true secret of the Stoics was how they combined them into a complete system of living. Epictetus had a specific method for transforming these techniques into a lived philosophy, a practical system we can implement in just 30 minutes a day. This approach has transformed lives around the world, from CEOs to people facing the most challenging circumstances. Let me show you exactly how to integrate everything we've discussed into a comprehensive framework that can revolutionize how you navigate life's challenges. Imagine waking up every day with clarity of mind, a sense of purpose, and an unshakable calmness that doesn't disappear the moment life throws its inevitable challenges your way. This isn't some unattainable ideal. It's the natural result of implementing the complete Stoic system we've been exploring throughout this video. Now it's time to bring everything together into a practical, sustainable daily practice. What we've been building isn't just a collection of isolated techniques, but a comprehensive operating system for your mind. Think of each practice we've covered as an essential component that works in harmony with the others. Just as your phone needs multiple systems working together to function optimally, your mind needs this integrated approach to maintain wisdom under pressure. For the first time, I feel like I have a complete mental framework, shared someone who implemented this system. Before, I'd try random mindfulness practices or read inspirational quotes, but nothing stuck. This system gives me a structure that addresses every aspect of mental challenges I face. Let's map out exactly how all these practices fit together into a 30-day implementation plan that will transform philosophy into lived experience. This isn't about becoming a perfect Stoic sage overnight. It's about gradual, sustainable progress that compounds over time. The plan begins with a methodical, step-by-step approach to implementation. Rather than trying to practice everything at once, we'll build the system progressively, ensuring each component becomes natural before adding the next. Week 1 focuses on morning practices, specifically the dichotomy of control and premeditation of challenges. Each morning, spend just 10 minutes identifying what's within your control today and anticipating potential challenges. This foundation sets the tone for everything that follows. Remember that Marcus Aurelius began each day by preparing his mind for the people and situations he would encounter. Begin each morning by saying to yourself, "Today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness," he wrote. Not because he was pessimistic, but because he understood the power of mental preparation. Try this right now. Close your eyes for 10 seconds and imagine facing your most common daily challenge with complete clarity about what aspects are within your control and which aren't. Feel the shift this creates in your approach. Week 2 adds midday practices, specifically the perspective shift and objective description techniques. Set a reminder for noon each day to zoom out from current concerns and practice describing situations factually rather than interpretively. This midday reset prevents the accumulation of stress and reactivity that often builds throughout the day. Epictetus emphasized the importance of ongoing practice throughout the day. These principles are not to be read in the morning and forgotten by evening. They must be exercised in daily living. The midday check-in ensures this continuous application. Week 3 incorporates evening reflection, the examination of conscience that Seneca practiced faithfully. Each evening, Review your day through the three questions. What did I do well? Where could I improve? What will I do differently tomorrow? This completes the daily cycle of preparation, practice, and reflection. By the end of these 3 weeks, you'll have established a complete daily Stoic routine. Now comes the integration phase, where we focus on applying these practices in specific contexts. Days 22 through 30 focus on what I call themed days, where you emphasize one Stoic virtue in all your interactions. For example, Day 22, Justice. Focus on treating everyone fairly and according to their needs. Day 23, Courage. Practice speaking truth and taking appropriate risks. Day 24, Temperance. Exercise moderation in all things. Day 25, Wisdom. Question assumptions and seek deeper understanding. This approach helps translate abstract virtues into concrete actions in various contexts of your life. The beauty of this system is its adaptability to your specific life circumstances. Whether you have 15 minutes or an hour available each day, the framework can be adjusted to fit your reality. The core practices remain the same, but the implementation varies according to your needs. "I was worried I wouldn't have time for this," one busy parent told me. "But I discovered I could do my morning preparation while brushing my teeth, my midday check-in during lunch, and my evening reflection while winding down before bed. It didn't require extra time, just more intentional use of transition moments I already had." For those who prefer a more minimal approach, I recommend what I call the essential daily trio. 5 minutes of morning preparation, a 1-minute midday check-in, and 5 minutes of evening reflection. Even this streamlined version creates remarkable results if practiced consistently. What makes this system particularly powerful is how it addresses different domains of life. The same framework applies whether you're navigating relationship challenges, work pressures, health concerns, or existential questions. For relationships, apply the dichotomy of control to separate what you can and cannot change about others. Use objective description to prevent emotional escalation during conflicts. Practice the perspective shift to see disagreements within the broader context of the relationship. For work challenges, use premeditation to anticipate obstacles and prepare responses. Apply the obstacle transformation to find opportunity in workplace difficulties. Practice voluntary discomfort to build resilience against stress and pressure. For health issues, implement amor fati to accept current realities while working constructively with them. Use the perspective shift to maintain emotional balance during physical challenges. Apply the dichotomy of control to focus energy on aspects of health you can influence. What surprised me, one practitioner shared, was how the system created a consistent response pattern across completely different areas of my life. Whether facing a health scare, a difficult conversation with my teenager, or a crisis at work, I found myself automatically applying the same principles with equal effectiveness. Implementation in daily life requires what I call practice points, specific triggers that remind you to apply Stoic principles. These might include when your alarm sounds in the morning, trigger for preparation; before checking email, trigger for dichotomy of control; when feeling frustrated, trigger for objective description; during your commute, trigger for perspective practice; before difficult conversations, trigger for premeditation; when facing disappointment, trigger for amor fati. By linking practices to specific daily moments, you ensure consistent application without relying solely on willpower or remembering. 1 month in the life of someone following this complete system reveals the transformative potential. They begin each day with intentional preparation rather than reactive consumption of news or social media. They navigate challenges with a clear sense of what they can control. They maintain perspective during difficulties and view obstacles as opportunities for growth. They reflect each evening, extracting wisdom from experience rather than merely accumulating days. After 30 days, one person reported, I noticed that situations that would have previously derailed my entire day now registered as minor events to be navigated. My emotional baseline became remarkably stable, and my effectiveness in all areas increased noticeably. The application of Stoicism in relationships deserves special attention. Many practitioners find that these principles transform how they interact with others. By applying the dichotomy of control, they stop trying to change people and instead focus on their own responses. By using objective description, they prevent minor disagreements from escalating into major conflicts. By practicing perspective, they maintain connection to what matters in relationships rather than becoming fixated on temporary issues. My relationship with my partner completely transformed, one practitioner shared, not because they changed, but because I stopped reacting to their behavior and started responding with intention. The same triggers still exist, but my relationship to them is entirely different. In work contexts, the Stoic framework provides equally powerful tools. The premeditation of challenges helps prevent being blindsided by difficulties. The perspective practice ensures that daily stresses don't obscure larger purpose. The obstacle transformation approach converts workplace problems into opportunities for innovation and growth. When facing setbacks in this system, which inevitably happen, the Stoic approach itself provides the solution. Rather than seeing a missed practice as failure, view it as information. Rather than abandoning the system after inconsistency, use the evening reflection to identify patterns and adjust accordingly. What made this approach different from previous attempts, someone told me, was how it handled imperfection. On days when I completely forgot my practices, the system had a built-in recovery mechanism, the evening reflection that got me back on track immediately. To measure your progress effectively, track both practices and results. Note which Stoic techniques you're implementing consistently and what effects you observe in your responses to challenging situations. This data-driven approach prevents both discouragement and complacency by providing objective feedback on your development. The question of community deserves mention here. While Stoicism can be practiced individually, finding or creating a group of fellow practitioners accelerates growth significantly. Whether an online forum, a local meetup, or just one accountability partner, shared practice creates both support and healthy challenge. Meeting weekly with others practicing the same system kept me consistent, one person shared. We'd discuss challenges, share insights, and hold each other accountable. The philosophy came alive through these conversations in ways that solitary practice couldn't achieve. If you're starting this journey today, begin with just one practice, the morning preparation. Tomorrow, add the evening reflection. Gradually build the complete system over 30 days, allowing each component to become natural before adding the next. Remember that consistency matters more than perfection, and that steady practice over time yields remarkable results. What the Stoics discovered 2,000 years ago, and what I've rediscovered in my own journey, is that these practices aren't just isolated techniques, they're a path to a completely different life. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Begin today with the first practice I shared, and in 30 days, you won't just think differently, you'll live differently. The transformation available through this system isn't about escaping life's challenges, but engaging with them more effectively. It's not about suppressing emotions, but experiencing them without being controlled by them. It's not about detachment from life, but deeper, more intentional engagement with what truly matters. In the words of Epictetus, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. This simple principle, when applied through the systematic practice we've explored, creates a life of clarity, purpose, and resilience. Not because circumstances are perfect, but because you've developed the internal resources to navigate whatever comes with wisdom and grace. Begin today. Start small. Trust the process, and watch as, day by day, thought by thought, choice by choice, you build not just a philosophy but a completely new way of being in the world.